Okay, this is my beginning. Visit Vancouver, mountains, water, and woods, which is, of course, the area around Vancouver is very much mountains, water, and woods. You're going to see a lot of that. Vancouver is one of these magical spots that's surrounded on a peninsula with mountains. So they say you can go skiing in the morning and sailing in the afternoon. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. It hasn't been settled by Westerners for all that long, but of course it's been settled by the Native people, the First Nations, as they're called, since back probably 8 to 10,000 years, at least from the archaeological records. So Vancouver is right here. It is not on Vancouver Island, as you see, which is a separate island, but it's on the mainland, but it is surrounded on a peninsula, and we'll see that on some other maps a little better. Canada is split right through the islands. The Channel Islands belong to Canada, and the San Juan Islands to the state of Washington, to the US. So the first people who came here, other than the First Nations, were the Spanish captain Jose Maria Navarez in 1791. He was Spanish, but he didn't put the flag in the ground. So the next year, Naval Captain George Vancouver in 1792 put the British flag there. But the area wasn't settled by Europeans until almost a century later, 1862. And it grew pretty quickly after the Canadian Pacific Railroad went all the way from the East Coast. And many of the people who worked on that were Chinese. And so there began very early to be a big Chinese settlement there. So we're looking at the downtown area. As you can see, it is surrounded by water. The downtown is this area right here, and it's wonderful, Stanley Park. Similar to maybe the park in New York City, Central Park, where it's very close to the downtown area. We're going to look at both of those and also Granville Island and the University of the Anthropology Museum out at the University of British Columbia. The ferries to the Gulf and up at the other side. We'll see those in a minute. We're going to look at North Vancouver and West Vancouver, where we can get our ferries to the north coast and up the coast a little bit, and some of the islands. So this is a view from Stanley Park. And Vancouver is a wonderful city with all the amenities you would expect in a big city: fine dining, shopping, museums, galleries, music, theater, some funky neighborhoods. That's a lot of many ethnic neighborhoods. You can walk down the street and see Greek and Italian and all kinds of restaurants. So it's a bustling city, even though all around town you're going to see the First Nation art and totem poles and things like that to remind us that we are in that country. It does have a temperate climate, unlike nearby Washington and inland British Columbia. So this temperate climate with mild winters typically mean fog and rain rather than freezing rain, which is nice, nice kind of weather to have. So it does have possibilities for lots of outdoor activities since the weather is usually pretty mild. Excuse me. I've got my water handy. So Stanley Park, as we say, is close to downtown. People can go on their lunch hour out to the park. Highway 99 runs right through the city on Hastings Street and out through the park and up to the North Shore. Some of the places we'll look at downtown are Gastown, the Chinatown, the Vancouver Art Gallery, and we'll see the Laughing Men here as we go out into Stanley Park. So Gastown is at the western border of the old Granville town site that started up in 1870. So it was very close to the ocean, to the north shore of the downtown area. But by the it was settled in the early 1900s. But by the 1960s, it had become the Skid Row area. It was really fallen into disrepute. And so the shop owners in the area kind of got together and restored it, rehabilitated it. And the story, the figure you see here is Gassy Jack. And he was one of the people who were in that neighborhood. He owned a hotel there, but he was known as a bartender who liked to spout with all his crazy stories. So they called him Gassy Jack. We'll look at the plaque here in a minute. This base of it is the stump of the maple tree. So this was Maple Square, or actually the beginning center of Vancouver itself. And what that looks like is Gassy Jack, whose real name was John Dayton, who was born in Hull, England. But he was an adventurer, riverboat pilot and captain, and he's had a hotel here in Vancouver. So this statue was dedicated to him. He lived in 1830 to 1875, and this statue is from 1986. So this mound is the maple tree, and this is the plaque that you just saw. It says, "Here stood the old maple tree under whose branches the pioneers met in 1885," and shows the name Vancouver for this city. Because of course, George Vancouver was the one who laid claim to it for the British. And here is something typically seen in Vancouver, some of the native art. Another thing you're going to see in Gastown is the steam clock. They used steam to heat these buildings, and there was a steam vent that came up right here that was kind of a hazard. And so again, the shop owners in the neighborhood got together and built a steam clock over the vent. So a steam clock, there are not very many of them left. It's a clock that's partially or powered by a steam engine and an electric engine. So the clock is now owned by the city of Vancouver, but it was bought by the people in the area. It has a whistle on it and displays the time on 4 sides of it. And at the quarter hours, it plays the Westminster chime. You know the tune, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. You've all heard it, and it sounds once on the hour. So it's a favorite place to meet in Gastown. And the area itself is very nice to go shopping in. You see lots of trees and hanging baskets. There are restaurants, antique shops, all that kind of stuff. It's really a fun place to hang out. It also has a stop for the stop and go tour. So if that's your method of seeing Vancouver, and that's a good way to kind of see the highlights, it stops right there in Gastown. And not very far away is Chinatown. And Chinatown is Canada's largest Chinatown, and it's a National Historic Site in Canada. This is the entrance to it. There have been several. This is the latest one. It's this little map of the area. The Gastown is just right up here, but the main part of it's Pender Street. The archway you saw is number 1 right here. Here's a little, I don't know what you call it. A key, I guess, yes, key, thank you. What you might see in that area. The number 2, the Sun Yat-sen Garden and park is right here. And along both of these streets, there are lots of Chinese buildings that you'll see. The first generation immigrants came from Hong Kong, and they called it Hongcouver. However, in recent years, most of the immigration has been from mainland China. And it's still a popular tourist attraction and is one of the largest historic Chinatowns in North America. However, in later years, in the last few years, more Cantonese, Chinese coming from mainland China have gone not to this area, but to Richmond, which is a suburb south of Vancouver proper. But they didn't call that Chinatown. They called that Golden Village in Richmond. They don't want to be associated with this. In recent years, particularly in COVID, a lot of the shops in this area have been closing up due to lack of tourism. And of course, it's been wonderful for tourists. So most of these shops now have closed. I have just been reading about. One thing you can see along here, besides the colorful shops, are some of the historic buildings that when Chinese settlers came, they were often greeted by these Chinese societies. And you'll see up on the tops of the buildings the names of some of them that helped newcomers. And they also did things like had Chinese language classes and English classes. They provided legal counseling, helped people find a place to live or a job, help them with immigration and these kinds of things. So these Chinese often represented an area in China or perhaps a family name that people could relate to when they came to Vancouver. So there is a large Asian population. Here you see that building head on, another one right here. There is a large Asian population to this day, as well as a large ethnic population from all over the world. Very, very international city. This building was built more recently for one of the festivals. So going to the Sun Yat-sen Garden, it's a Chinese garden that's an authentic representation of the Ming Dynasty era tradition of gardens. And it was the first one outside of mainland China. So what is a traditional garden? It's got rock forms and lily ponds, pagodas, lush plants. Now there's a park nearby that's free, but going into the garden itself, there is a fee to go to that. It was listed as the world's top city garden by National Geographic a couple of years back. So a classic Chinese garden, as I say, has rocks. You might see some of them right here. When I was in China, I thought those rocks were really interesting, and they were explained to me as they put normal rocks into a lake for about 100 years, and the water will eat away at them to make them really interesting. And then they will put them out and put them in these Chinese gardens, these traditional gardens. So I thought, well, that's a long time to wait for your rocks. But in 1986, they had 53 master Chinese craftsmen from China and 950 crates of material like these rocks, pagodas, tiles, and things like that were brought from China to build this garden. So it's a really very authentic garden. So we had a little stop at the Vancouver Art Gallery. When my sisters and I travel together, we typically go to art galleries because they're both artists. My sister in Vancouver is a full-time painter and landlady. She has some properties that she rents to. When we were there, from when these pictures were here, this was outside the building. I don't think it's out there anymore, but it was plain when we went, and people were asked to put stickers on it. It could be any kind. You see some people have a little bit larger one on his forehead of maybe the selfie they took, but they may be anything. They may be stamps or any kind of stickers. And so until the whole thing was covered with these, so I thought that was sort of an interesting thing to do. This is outside of the front of it, inside the lobby, and there's a nice place to have lunch if you're in the mood for a good lunch stop. The art gallery is a nice place to do it. The exhibit that we saw there was a local artist, Donald Copeland. And you can see in most of his works, some of the area around the mountains and the ocean. Stanley Park is one of everybody's favorites who live there. It's a little bit over 1,000 acres. It's one of the city parks that was not designed by a landscaper. It's mostly just native wilderness. There are still let's see what it was. Most of the park is still forested just as it was in the 1800s. It's got about 500,000 trees on it. And some of them are native trees that still go back a couple hundred years, as tall as 250 feet tall. There have been some things added to it. You can see how dense the forest is and how close to the downtown area. So if you work in this West End area, it's easy to come over. Again, on your bike, you can kayak a bike all the way around it. This is closed. The seawall is closed. There's first, second, and third beaches. There's a children's area. Over here, there would be the aquarium, and there are 2 lakes on it. We're going to look at this one and a larger one here. There's a marina. There's just a lot of stuff you can see on it. The pictures that Jack had of the totem poles are over in this area as well. And the iron I'm sorry, Lion Gates Bridge, the highway that we looked at on the map, comes across here over into North Vancouver. So this Beaver Lake is an interesting one because it's overgrown, and it shows how it was how a lake turns into a non-lake. Here you see a map of all the different things that are in the park. You might see carriages. You can go for a carriage ride, or you may maybe do it for your wedding. You can rent kayaks or canoes. Of course, we have the beautiful views everywhere. First class aquarium, many totem poles, and of course they were painted to begin with. So this is Beaver Lake. There's a walking trail through here. There are trails all through here. You can do a lot of trail hiking. So that the lake is becoming shallower with all the lilies blooming. And you can see in here, whereas originally it had a lot of water, now the water's becoming land. And so the forest will eventually take over and it won't be a pond anymore. And they're just letting it go natural and revert back to being not a pond anymore. But there are still some pretty lilies that you can see blooming and flowers in the park. So you're up to see joggers and cyclists if you get into the park. And there'll be festivals and different things going on from time to time. I was asked before we started tonight what time of the year I went. Well, I've been there 7 or 8 times. I've lost track, but always in the summer. And when I travel with my sister, it's usually in the winter, so she can get out of Vancouver, because winter tends to be gray, drizzly, not a whole lot of sunshine. So if you're planning to go, your best time is summertime. So this would be immediately across the street from going into Stanley Park, and you see people waiting at the light ready to go. And back in here, you see something really interesting. They're called the Laughing Men, or the Amazing Laughter statues by Yue Min-jun. They were built for the Olympics in 2010. And you can see how big they are in some of these pictures. They were a big hit with the Vancouver people. You see how huge they are, about twice life size. And when it was time for the Olympics to shut down and these to be taken away, the Vancouverites were really upset about that. So somebody with deep pockets bought them for the city. Now that the artist was asking $5 million, but he managed to get them for $1.5 million. But still, there was a pretty nice gift to the city. And this was bought by the owners of Lululemon. Have you seen that on some of the clothes that they offer online? That's the couple that bought these statues. Wow. But they're really fun to walk around in, and you can't help getting this contagious laugh yourself. So just a little bit about the Vancouver neighborhoods, what Vancouver looks like. My sister lives fairly close to downtown in an older house that looks something like these. They're built like a half story above ground, and she's got renters who live in this downstairs area and then somebody upstairs as well. So there's like a half story up before you get into the main floor. But of course, Vancouver is growing and property is very expensive and growing more expensive all the time. Since it's so limited. So there's a lot of high rises going on all over, and the neighborhoods are changing a lot. It really is an expensive town to live in. And many people who are wealthy, particularly from Asia, are coming in and buying up condos, not necessarily even living in them, but just for when they want to leave China at some point, or leave Japan or wherever, Taiwan, they can come here. They might rent them out in the meantime. But since we have a nice climate, we have lots of flowers in the neighborhoods as well. There are festivals. This is moi over here. My sister Maggie, who's the artist from Vancouver, and her friend, and my sister from Denver. So we were at a jazz festival for this picture. Maggie likes the jazz and plays in a little jazz band herself, and there are lots of festivals going on all through the summertime. And as evening commences, you can get some nice sunset views. Granville Island is a little place you might want to stop and have lunch. It's the public market. It's on an island right next to downtown. It also is the site of Emily Carr art school, which is where my sister and her daughter went to art school. Also in the neighborhood, if you're out that way, are the Vancouver Museum and the Maritime Museum, if you happen to like that kind of stuff. So it's a typical market, and with all kinds of good things to eat, and lots of restaurants as well with nice views of the harbor. And you can look out this, I took out the window. Our next stop is the Museum of Anthropology, and it's not in the downtown area. It's off to the west as part of the University of British Columbia. And this is the back view of it. This pond was added later. Let's see. This was founded in 1947, but of course this building is a lot newer than that. This building's from 1976. And it's located on Marine Drive if you happen to be out that way. And I'm going to, it has a lot of the First Nation artwork in it. And many of these would have been painted, as we saw in the totems. This is kind of the color scheme that you'll see in these Northwest Indian artworks and around this border, and the kind of artwork that they use. Very often they're birds or animals that you see in them. And you see some of the inland passage here. So there would have been the First Nations living all along here. Again, some of the artwork from that era. And many of the local artists are inspired by this kind of art. And you'll see it in the local artists' paintings and sculptures. And the color scheme is usually the red and black, but occasionally you'll see something else. There are also poles and pole houses on the property behind the museum. And this would have been, the totem pole would have been a family one, giving their family history, so to speak. And they would be outside the house and also sometimes inside the house, sometimes in meeting houses and the big ones. So these are some on the grounds. You can see how big they are. And they would have been painted. So the ones that you see are not painted. The paint's just worn off with the weather. This is the Haida story. Haida meaning the human beings. So every culture has their stories of creation story of where we came from. So this is the story about Raven finding mankind in a clamshell. And the artist Bill Reed made a sculpture of that. This is the same one from the other side. So let me tell you the story of the Haida story of creation. It goes like this. According to Haida legend, the raven found himself alone one day on Rose Spit Beach at Haida Gwaii. Suddenly, he saw an extraordinary clamshell at his feet, and protruding from it were a number of small creatures. The raven coaxed them to leave the shell and join him. Emerged from the partly open clamshell to become the first Haida.
Mary?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes. Yes.
Your voice kind of did, or there was a noise that overrode your voice, and I'd love to actually hear so the raven found the clamshell with little creatures in it, and then we couldn't understand it.
Yeah, I heard that noise as well. I'm hoping somebody put a mute on. Yeah, when they saw the little creatures, it says the raven coaxed them to leave the shell to join him in his wonderful world. Some were hesitant at first, but eventually, overcome by curiosity, they emerged from the partly open clamshell to become the first Haida, the first human beings. So this is the creation story according to the Northwest Indians.
Okay.
There are other things in the museum besides the Haida or the First Nations. For example, these beautiful dresses from Fiji Islands, Indonesian, and this one I think is African. I am not sure. I don't remember what it was, and apparently didn't make a note of what it was. But it's a very interesting ethnic museum if you like that kind of stuff, particularly the Northwest Indians. So as I said, there are two wonderful gardens in Vancouver. If you don't make it out to Butchart Gardens, they're very similar in nature and the kinds of things they grow. One is the Van Dusen Botanical Garden. And it covers about 55 acres and displays plants from all over the world. And there are various areas of like South African plants, South American plants, and so forth. There are also some totem poles and large sculptures. With this nice mild climate, there are lots of things that grow there, and they really have some beautiful plants and gardens. There's a Korean temple, which is very nice. It was built relatively recently. But beautiful flowers, and you'll see how big some of them can get as well. Lots of sculpture all over the garden. I'm just giving a little bit of a sample. Rose garden. These are my sisters. You see how big these flowers are. I think these are from South Africa. Some flowers that we don't normally see here. And since I've never been there in the fall, I did grab one off the internet to show you that indeed they do have color in the fall. And that's nice to see too, if you happen to be there at that time. The Queen Elizabeth Garden is affectionately called the Queenie Garden. And it was also built in a quarry like Bouchard Gardens was, or at least part of it was. And it's, again, a beautiful garden. This would be the quarry part of it. And lovely little ways to plant flowers. I thought that were really interesting. So these are all my photos. And there are other things in the garden as well. They have, as I say, a lot of sculptures. They have a conservatory as well, and they have 75 of the dancing fountains, which are nice when they're running on. So we're going to take off now and go up to the North Shore. Again, this is what we've been looking at, and the Anthropology Museum is way out here, and Richmond's just south of that. The Lions Gate Bridge, we went over that. My sister lives right in here. So we went over the Lions Gate Bridge. We're going to go to Capilano Canyon and Grouse Mountain. And these are in several different trips, and we're in all the same one. This is Lighthouse Park down here. We're going to show a little bit of that and where the ferries go if you want to go up and the road up the coast a little bit. So first is to Capilano Canyon, a very interesting place. You can see there are lots of things to do if you go up there. It's up in the mountains in a wooded area, and it's, as you see, over a canyon. Originally, it was built in 1903 I'm sorry, in 1889 was the first one. Was originally made of hemp ropes with a deck of cedar plants, but it was replaced with a wire cable bridge in 1903. And so it's been purchased by a couple of people, and this bridge was completed in 1956. So it's a little bit newer, and it doesn't look like it's safe, but it really is. It's 460 feet long and 230 feet above the water. So it's a long way down. And yes, have people been killed, not from the bridge itself, but from trying to climb on rocks or check selfies or do dumb things. So there have been some falls here, and usually fatal. They've added one thing. It's fun. It kind of wobbles a little when you walk across, but it's kind of fun. This one has been added after I've been there, so I grabbed this one off the internet. It was added in 2011, called the Cliff Walk. You notice that it's just held in place by cables above the water. So another place that you can go up in the mountains is Grouse Mountain, and there's a cable car that can take you up there. There's a lodge and restaurant. And lots of places, if you happen to be there when there's snow on the ground, and that might be spring or fall, not just winter, because it is up high, and you can find some of these snow and winter sports up there, and then be down for lunch and by noon. And so you have a beautiful view from there, no matter what you're up there for. And Lighthouse Park is a virgin forest that's not ever been had anything cut in it. It's 182 acres of forest with trails through it. And again, these places are just minutes from downtown Vancouver. So you can be out in wilderness area in any of these places. So it was founded, it was discovered in 1792 when the first George Vancouver came. So he knew about this place. Lighthouse was built out there because it is at this promontory and a place where we turn into the Burrard Sound. And nearby is where the ferries leave, and we're going to see that on our way back from our trip up the Sea to Sky Highway. And that's that Highway 99 that runs right through the city, through Vancouver and up the coast. And our first major town would be Squamish. If you're going up again to Whistler, this would be up at the end of the road. And these dots along here represent the different native populations that lived along here. And they would often meet in Vancouver or one of these other spots for potlatches, which were big gatherings once a year. And here it lists all the different tribes, First Nation settlements. So the Sea to Sky Highway runs along here. And we did not go all the way to Whistler, but I included a few pictures just in case you're interested in what that looked like or wanted to do it. We opted instead to go to a little lake so Maggie's daughter could have a little swim. But the road follows the inlet and is a really beautiful sights all along. And if you're interested, you can even take a couple of days to follow this highway up. And here are some of the things that you can do along the way. And we've done a few of those. But this ordinarytraveler.com is one you might want to look at if you're planning a trip up there to see what things you can do. Our destination that day was Shannon Falls, which is in the provincial park being like one of our state parks. We have provinces instead of states. So this is a lovely Shannon Falls that is right along the way. Let's see, it's about 36 miles from Vancouver and near Squamish, and it's in a park that's about 210 acres. And this waterfall falls from a height of about 1,100 feet. So it's a pretty high one. Here would be the sisters and I at the falls. And right next door to it is another sky lift that you can do, the Sea to Sky gondola, again with beautiful views. In a gondola, as you come up over it, you can see the two mountains off to the side. This is from the gondola. And you come up to a nice place again to have a meal. And this is kind of a map of where it is. This is the gondola coming from down below, and the lodge that we just saw. And there's kind of another hanging bridge that goes over to another viewpoint, and all this these trails through here. You could walk up if you were that kind of person, and I'm not that kind of person. But we did see a lot of, we did go out hiking along this and saw all these mountains around with really pretty views. So here's that little hanging bridge over to this viewpoint and the two mountains, pilot and co-pilot. So we did walk along the trail and had some lovely views. Coming back, we stopped at Porto Cove, which does have scuba diving, interestingly enough. I would think it would be a little bit cold, maybe not for me. But there are artificial shipwrecks and reefs that support all kinds of marine life along here. And don't forget the orcas come through here and the humpbacks also. So it's a pretty rocky beach though. But it was late in the day and it made for some pretty pictures to see along here. There's a post that tells a little bit about the area and some more totem poles. You see the late day sky, the deep shadows along the way. And heading into a sunset. So I said I would throw in a picture of Whistler in case you're interested in going up to where they held the Olympics a few years ago. And of course, there are festivals and things to do all year round. They do have another museum up there, a cultural center with the Northwest Indians and a beautiful waterfall nearby. So about the ferries, here we have again Vancouver. The ferries are going to lead from two spots, from Horseshoe Bay and also from Tsawwassen. The airport, but just for information, is sort of in between those two. So the ferries go, there's a big stream of them. They're part of the highway system of Vancouver, of British Columbia. So out of these from Metro Vancouver, you can go from Horseshoe Bay or to I'm not even sure how to pronounce that, Tsawwassen. Tsawwassen?
Yep.
Thank you. I've never heard how it was pronounced. So if we want to go to the Sunshine Coast, which is where we were just talking about, up the Sky to Sea road to Little River, Langdale, and so forth, we would go from Horseshoe Bay, anything northbound. And and from Sawasan, we would go to the southern Gulf Islands. We're going to go to Galiano Island in a minute, Salt Spring, Victoria. So those would come out of that southern ferry terminal. So here's the Horseshoe Bay terminal. And you can see that if you buy one, you would want to book in advance because they only take so many car ferries, cars on a ferry. You would want to take your car probably. The car ferry does include 2 people. If you have an extra one, it's a short, not a very expensive walk-on fee for that. But you would want to be there a little bit early to get in line to get your car on the ferry. And the ferries go through the islands that we looked at, these Channel Islands. So it's a beautiful trip on the ferry, especially on a nice day. So if you're interested in going out to Vancouver Island, you could drive down to Victoria, about an hour drive. And it is where the capital of the British Columbia. And the Parliament is there, and some scenes along the inner harbor. It's in a little bay. Also a museum, again, with a lot of Northwest Indians. The Empress Hotel. This one I grabbed off there because I didn't have a very good picture of the Empress Hotel. But this is known for having high tea in the afternoon if you're so inclined. Butchart Gardens is the reason a lot of people go to Vancouver Island. It's midway between Nanaimo at the top end of the ferry and Victoria at the bottom end of that 1 hour drive.
Did you go for the high tea?
I did not go to high tea there, but I have heard it's wonderful. Yeah. But I have been to Victoria, not in a while. Those pictures are on slides, so I only had the one that was actually my own picture. So a lot of it is built in the Butchart Gardens. A lot of it's built into this quarry and transformed, of course, into this beautiful garden. So these are not my photos, though I have similar photos of them, but they're mine are on slides. And I particularly like the hanging baskets of the begonias and climbing roses, and it really is just a magical place. So if you have a chance to go, it's wonderful. If you don't, the 2 gardens, the Queenie Garden and Van Dusen, are similar, but also very nice in Vancouver. So we did have a chance, one of our trips up there, to go out to the islands and spend a couple of days. And we did go from Sawasan on the ferries through the islands. You say, this is Main Island, M-A-Y-N-E, to Galiano Island. We rented a little cottage there. Here is Vancouver Island proper. If you were going all the way to Victoria, you could go here to Schwartz Bay, which is Nanaimo and Victoria. Or you could come from Port Angeles in Washington, if you are coming from Washington State. So we rode the ferry and went over to Galiano. Just on the ferry itself, and rented a little cottage. So this was some blackberries, our view from the cottage, and we could see the ferries going by. This is Main Island over here. So it's a nice relaxing place to put your feet up and just kind of relax. There are 2 state parks, or provincial parks, as they would say, on the island. So there's lots of good hiking. It's interesting geologically. There are some interesting rock formations along here. And as we're going to see in some artists' works, that they were inspired by these rocks that were really interesting in the area. Montague Provincial Park is the other one we went to. The rocks, they're a little different. They look kind of like you've scraped your fingers across a blackboard. They have these long stripes through them in most places. But there's also a marina and a place to have lunch. You always want to know about lunch spots. Rent a kayak if you like. But we had hiking trails in both of them. These mountains that you're seeing are on the mainland of near Vancouver, just north of Vancouver. So again, if you're interested in photography, hiking, you see some of those rocks that we were just seeing a while ago over on the other shore. Little wildlife. So we got to see some of the artists on Sunday afternoon, where a bunch of them had their homes open. And don't worry, Kathleen, I'm almost finished.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
So some of the artists
Fascinating.
were clearly inspired by some of the local flora and fauna. This one we particularly like because of the rocks that she had there. And of course, they live there and they have lovely gardens, like most people do that live out in the country. It's very wooded, very rural. But there are some little towns and a couple of shops, ice cream places that you can go to. If I think there's even one bed and breakfast. I think this is right outside of it. But you can't rent a car on most of the islands. I would say take a car. You can rent bikes, maybe motor scooters, something quiet. But typically they don't have car rentals. So if you're going to go to the islands, I would say go on the car ferry. And if you're renting a car or if you have somebody there, like my sister who has a car, you can do that. My other trip to an island was to Bowen Island. It's very close to Vancouver, the closest one. Just went over for a day trip. Had a little picnic out there. It's very small. There are houses on the islands. Of course, you can imagine people living that close or commuting into town very often or commuting at least once a week. So some of these little cabins would be pretty pricey if you're thinking about moving out there. But again, a little down near the ferry dock, there were little shops and things, but and rentals. So just in general, some sightseeing about Vancouver. If you're interested, the hop on hop off bus is a good thing. There are all kinds of day tours that you can take. You see lists of things to do. You won't run out of things to do in Vancouver. I haven't even seen everything that is there, and I've been there many times. If you're interested in whale watching, the time to go is late July through December, or through September, excuse me. I talked yesterday to my son in Maui, and these orcas and humpbacks are now having their calves in Hawaii off the coast of Maui, the west coast of Maui. So these same ones are going to be coming up the coast through the Inland Passage all the way to Alaska. So the time you're going to see them in Vancouver is this time. So here are some things you can do. Find a tour, hop a bus or a trolley, rent a car, get on a ferry, rent a bike or a kayak, explore the city, the North Shore, the islands, Vancouver Island, have fun. And to end, we're on Salt Spring Island with sunset from the west. And that ends our very brief tour.
Oh, Mary, that was wonderful. Goodness.
You want to go right now?
I do have,
It brought back many
yes,
wonderful
actually.
memories.
Now's not the time to go.
Actually, I had gone quite a while, like in my 20s with a friend and girlfriend, and I bought a souvenir of a little jewelry holder for traveling, and I still use it.
Yeah.
I mean, regularly, every trip I take. So I wanted to show, if this will show up, let's see. So usually I print a map.
Yeah.
Is that showing?
little bit.
Let me see if I can. Well, anyway, the little red spots are evergreen places.
Okay.
And usually I print a map out or, make it so you can see it. But we do have we have 17 places to stay up in that area. And so, and they would also help you get around and know the, places based on your interests, what you might want to see. And for those visitors, when you stay with an Evergreen person, you've talked to them before you make your permanent arrangements, but you stay for $20 a night, and the host fix you breakfast too. So
Just for a couple, you're single, it's 15. So yeah, a couple is 20.
single is 15. Yeah, right.
Single is
Single's 15. So,
and particularly in these hotels, are pricey. Vancouver's.
One of the
yeah,
interesting,
Vancouver is pretty expensive.
Yeah. So if you stay, that's wonderful. Of course, I have a place to stay when I go there. So.
Okay,
That's
but
right.
you're
Which is
using
the best.
you're using American dollars, so you're getting like 30% less.
Yes. Canadian dollars started when I first started going up there, they were almost equal. And now my sister is really reluctant to come to the United States because it costs her a lot more than if we go there. So we were hoping to go to Tofino this past summer. Of course, that didn't happen. That's out on Vancouver Island, on the west coast of Vancouver Island. But that didn't happen. But yes, we're trying to do more Canadian trips. We've done the East Coast, a couple trips that direction, so she doesn't have that expense.
We have a couple of quick questions, and I know Florence has something she'd like to say, but we do need to finish our little other part of the program. Can you quickly say who was Stanley Park named after? Someone asked that.
Yes, I could. Let me who it is.
Does Tim know?
I didn't mention it because I was trying to get through this really quick. I've got a lot more information than what I told you about.
Oh,
Um,
well, that's okay.
It's Lord Stanley, who the Stanley Cup in hockey is named after.
yes, it was Lord Stanley, the 16th Earl of Derby, a British politician who had been recently appointed the Governor General. So he was the Governor General there, and that's who it was named after.
Oh, okay.
It's their first park from 1886. So it was always a park. It never was anything else or landscape architects or anything like that. It was always a natural state, kept in its natural state as much as possible. And it's big enough to where you can put some buildings in it, still have, it seem like you're miles away. You're away from the city.
Okay. Quickly, Florence, did you have something you had wanted to say? Press your, yeah.
I that's an area that's one of our favorites too. And we went from the Vancouver Island north all the way to the top. And you can drive on the beaches there. The sand is very hard and it's very beautiful. It's completely unexpected and beautiful. And then you see the hanging baskets of flowers.
Yes, all over.
And the high tea and the Bouchard Gardens. I think if anyone picks a vacation, that's such a breathtaking area. It's not discovered. You're very lucky that you could do as much there. I guess we had been there about 10, 15 times a long time ago, but it's really spectacular. And thank you for showing this to us. It's really beautiful.
Well, it's one of my favorite. As I said, lost track of how many times I've been there. I've been
Felicity, thank you for answering Marcia's question on the chat. I appreciate that, because we really do need to get to the other part of the program. And then if we have other questions, we can stay and talk a little bit longer. So